Namaskar. On behalf of Dr. K. Srinivas Rauji, Secretary Sahitya Akademi, I welcome all of you to this literary forum program devoted on poetry of transitions, and this program is being chaired by the one who doesn't require any introduction, Sri Amarendra Katwaji, who is a retired diplomat, writes and publishes in English, Odia, Hindi and Spanish. He has more than 30 collections of poems and other edited and professional publications. His works have been translated into all major Indian and foreign languages. Winner of several awards, he participated as a group chair or a poet in many national and international poetry festivals. And he translated few Spanish writers and Jain literature into English for Gnanpith. And he participated, as I said, in many national and international levels, like the places like Madrid, Paraguay, Budapest, London, Melbourne, Nairobi, etc. So with these few words, I wholeheartedly welcome you to this literary forum program. And in this, we have three speakers. One is Sri Amlan Jyoti Goswami ji, and followed by Miss Mandira Ghosh ji, and as well as Miss Mishna Chanu ji. With these few words, may I request the chair to take over the session, and at the same time, I will certainly fail in my duty if I don't acknowledge, I would say, divine presence of Sri. Do you know, ma'am, why I use the divine presence? When you think that knowledge is divine, so your presence is divine. Yes. So, thank you. With these few words, I welcome you, all of you, to this literary forum program, and hand over the next, most toughest duty to the chair.
Thank you. Thank you. When we talk about poetry of transitions, we are talking a hell of a lot of things. When it originally started against reaction against intellectual poetry. But today's poetry of transition is basically talking about starting from the feminism movement. Poetry of the transvestite poets, lots of them. We had organized a reading here. It's anti-war, anti-racism, freedom towards anarchism or annihilation of individualism, or just studying myself in individual style. When we are talking about transitional poetry, it is no more just a reaction. It can be in trend, in style, by specific events, just as a trend or as a development. Transitional poetry combines text, context and pretext. Therefore, you need not define it. It speaks in many voices. So, for example, Emeka Okereke, the famous poet of Africa, he writes in his transitional poetry, "Fate is to make homes. Language is just a sojourner." Paul Vernon, he talks about symbolism does not give lucid information. That's why I cry. That's his transitional poetry. Who can forget Sylvia Plath? Brings all her personal experience, does not go about Wordsworth or Shakespeare or nothing. My living, my suffering, my image of my suffering is my poetry. Nobody can write better than that. Today we have so many eminent people, Radha, Malasriji, Mandira, all our poets are here. What we'll do, we'll start it. Let each of them speak about 10 minutes of their journey into the poetry of transitions, what they do, their views, then we will proceed. Thank you. Amla, you start, please.
Let me have the pleasure of introducing Goswami ji. Has written two widely reviewed books of poetry, Reverberating and Vital Signs, both published by Poetry Wala. Reverberating was shortlisted for the Sahitya Akademi Award 2023, published in journals and anthologies across the world, including poetry, the Poetry Review, Penguin Vintage, Rattle and Sahitya Akademi. He is also a Best of the Net and Pushcart nominee. His work has appeared on street walls of Christchurch, business in Philadelphia, exhibitions in Johannesburg, and an e-gallery in Britain. He has reviewed poetry for Modern Poetry in Translation and Review 31. He also translates poetry from Assami into English and has read at various places including Delhi, New York, Chandigarh, Bristol, Boston and Bangalore. He grew up in Guwahati and lives in Delhi.
Thank you. I'll focus on a particular part of transition poetry, as it were. My immediate locus would be an inquiry into time. The minute we are getting into transition, immediately question arises as to whether this whole question of does poetry exist in its own time, just as it is rooted in particular historical circumstance and context, like a rag, poetry exists in its own time, has its own kind of temporal existence, or so I think. So this question of time, and it's not an easy thing to kind of say this way or that, because I keep moving back and forth on this question, because sometimes I feel that it is all historical, and you cannot escape history. At the same time, history becomes very suffocating, and so I feel that all poetry in that sense is you're playing snakes and ladders with time. And sometimes we are gobbled up, sometimes we are lucky. Sometimes when we are gobbled up, maybe we are lucky then too. I'll read a few poems if with the permission of...
The readings will come later.
After that. Yeah. The other thing, one was the point on time, and I feel that there is an interesting kind of moment of reflection on time and where does it fit in. The other interesting, if you want to kind of a personal development, so to speak, because you want us to talk about our own journeys in that sense. Right now in the course of my current development, I feel that this is how I feel, that the person writing the poem is different from the person reading it or performing it, and I feel that just as the creation of a poem is itself an accident of birth, circumstance, the graces, whatever that kind of, that the creation itself is a very kind of sacred moment. However, I also feel that a poem, after being born, the poem lives in sharing, and it lives in community. It is alive in this. So while and like all such circumstances of birth, the birth of a poem is a very private event, very personal private event. But the life of a poem has to transcend the circumstances within which it was created. And so it has to go beyond, and the poet has to let go, and has to be open and has to allow criticism, kind of rend oneself, so to speak, to all kinds of opinion, indifference, struggles, other people's interpretations. And in that sense, I feel that the life of a poem is in the kind of sharing of it. The sharing of a poem is also in the reading of it. And that's where I feel that the reading of it is also, there is an art to it. And there is a performative element to it. And that's why I go back to the oral tradition. And in the oral tradition, before all this came in, poets would travel, they were wandering districts would travel. And this idea of this text and written and all this bounded in kind of, it has to be this and that and structure and iambic and sonnet and all that are all very good things as structure. But at the heart of it, I feel, and this is something that we are very proud of our own tradition. That tradition is essentially an oral tradition, whether it's the Bhakti tradition of many hundreds of thousands of years ago, or even as we kind of go into more kind of in Bhasha poetry, etc. So I think it is an oral thing. The third and last thing I want to just put on the table is that is a question of language, and that's where this transition question is very interesting for me as a personal thing. I feel that my English poetry, while in English, is not Anglophone. So, in other words, while I'm writing in English, it doesn't have the texture of, shall we say, the influence of 1950s, 60s poetry as it evolved in England and the Romantics and so on. You cannot escape them. But I felt that in that sense, I would try to look at my own poetry as an attempt at kind of, it is itself Bhasha. So the English poetry itself is Bhasha. So the dichotomy between English poetry and Bhasha, English and Bhasha. Perhaps my intent is to kind of, my English poetry itself is Bhasha, and is in that sense it has to blend in the larger stream of Bhasha literature in this country, and as well as the multiple languages. So I rest.
Like Mr. Goswami said, poetry outgrows the poet. Language you use to write poetry can transcend the influential language which is outside you. But, so for example, there is a very famous poet of transition, Bhavan, V-U-O-N-G. What he says, every time I write, if there is a shift indicated, that means I am a poet in transition. That shift I am not bringing myself. Whatever I am seeing, whatever I am producing on paper, whatever I am experiencing, that is the shift it is bringing to me. Then trained style text language comes in. That also gives transition. Thank you. Let me invite Mandira, please.
Miss Mandira Ghoshji is an eminent poet who has authored 21 books in wide-ranging titles. Primarily a poet, she is the treasurer of the Poetry Society India and also in the editorial board. She is the guest editor of the special Indian edition of the 7th Curie Swansea magazine from Wales and the feature poet in April this year. A recipient of several awards and honors, she is awarded with the Senior Fellowship of the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. Last year, she was awarded Author of the Year from Asian Literary Society.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for providing such a generous introduction. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Sri Jyoti Kishan Verma, Dr. Rabindra and all Malasiras for organizing this forum and inviting me. Indeed, it is a great honor and a delight for me to speak on poetry on transition. I will go straight away to what Amlan Jyoti said on time. That transition or metamorphosis is a law of nature. Nothing is static in this universe. Every moment, every action, every space is dynamic, and these fleeting moments will pass, and the poet on changing and changing. A poet born in 1950 will not write the same poem in 2047 or so if he was born on that time. So time is a dynamic factor in writing poetry. But also time is an abstract phenomenon. There is nothing as the time is man-made. It's totally man-made. It's a fleeting, continuous from, like we say in our bhasha, as we say, anadi, adi, the eternal, infinite space and eternal time. So the beautiful poetry that was born in the Vedic ages still has Vedic ages in, like Gargi Maitri has written, Kosha has written, and several other poems later on. Khana has written in Bengali poetry also, and still as heard poems are being appreciated, and of course they are being recited in the villages of Bengal till now. Khana's poetry, and a very intelligent poet whose tongue was cut because she was more intelligent from Barha Mihira, whose father-in-law was an astrologer, and she was a brilliant girl. I will speak on transition as a poet and author began in my journey very briefly. With an early science background, I wanted to become a scientist, but also later on I became a poet. I use scientific terms in poetry. Thereafter, I brought science metaphysics in my verses. So I will suggest to state two lines, like the poetry in the beginning read like I am made of atoms, mainly of carbon and oxygen. I am matter, consciousness is the sunlight of my photosynthesis. So totally science. But and then climate change. Climate change is a very significant thing, which is mentioned. Tennyson, long back, describes description of nature as red in truth and law reflected a bleak increasing awareness that the cruelty of industrial revolution and the expanding empire showed the world not to be a warm creation of God, of a loving God, I should say, but instead to be impersonal, material and strict. Fire that cooks our food also burns our houses, and the water which quenches our thirst also floods our villages. So this antithesis of everything as energy. So as I had a science background, in the beginning I wrote poems like Thorns in a Poem on climate change long back in 1987. 87 I wrote the poem was published in Aroma by Piral Writers Workshop published, where I wrote that past global changes tell in the path of a tree, of the age and the year of the old earth. And then it goes on and on. I am not going to read the entire poem now. Also, the image of Nataraj also fascinated me. But how the change or the transition occurred in my work from a happy-go-lucky teenager of early days to a totally illusion poet of modern times who is witnessing war and pandemic. So I came out from the books like Aroma, New Sun, Poetry and Science Opposites Me, to the present of the tale of a gypsy in Kafka's world. To me, it has transformed into totally a Kafka's world, absurd, depressing, and also very distraught. So, and there are poems like, is there any need of war? On Russia and Ukraine war, and there are sentences like, in my background, nuclear waste is piled. Nukes can blow away the beggar as well as me. And towards the end, I should say that pandemic shattered us, and every individual, whether he is a poet, or a writer, or an artist, is being influenced by pandemic. There are few poems on pandemic, but out of pandemic also brought Rabindra brought out their poems of peregrinators that we were sitting at home, but we were thinking of going abroad, outside, to meet our relations and loved ones. So the book came out as a very highly popular book, and as it was, emotions were in the background of each and every poem, and how emotionally they are suffering, still wanted to meet their loved ones. I think that should be enough for now.
Thank you, Mandira. As she said, which is already said by a poet of transition, Maggie Nelson, that transition is not growth, it is unplanned evolution. It's not semantics, but rebirth of known words in unknown terms. And later on I'll give you lots of names, like today, in fact, after COVID, it has affected psychology of the whole generation, including the writers. So lots of poetry in transition coming. Plus, the war situation is there, Russia, Ukraine, Palestine, Israel. The poetry in transition is in bloom. But let me now invite Ms. Naji to speak up, poetry on transition for 10 minutes.
Miss Mishna Chanuji is a bilingual poet, writer, author, humanitarian, translator and editor from Assam, currently living in Gurgaon. She writes in her mother tongue, Manipuri, and in English. She has published 3 poetry books, namely A Little Piece of Melancholic Sky, the second one, Many Shades of Love, and the third one, The Silent Whispers. And one short story book also she penned for children, namely Once Upon a Time. As an editor, she has published 6 anthologies of poetry and 1 anthology of short stories for children. Her poems have been translated into 12 international languages and published in journals, anthologies and magazines worldwide.
Namaste, Kuramjari, and very good evening to all, and Happy New Year once again all. Although I have missed many of you by WhatsApp and for Facebook, but I'm missing you again. And before I start talking about what transition means to me or transition in my own poetry, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Sahitya Akademi and Madhusri Ma'am, the convener of English Language Board, and the Jyoti Verma sir, and all the members of Sahitya Akademi. This is not the first time I am attending at Sahitya Akademi, but this is the first time I am attending any discussion. And so for me, this time, this period is my transition period. And transition moment, because so far I have only recited poem, and today is the first time I am going to talk about any topic. When I got this invitation, I thought it's a little challenging for me because I never talk on any topic on Sahitya Akademi or anywhere. And frankly speaking, I was like that when I was in my school. I had this fear of stage. So whenever my teacher asked me to recite poem on stage, I ran and I come to home, and I'm scared to even recite a poem on stage. And now I'm reciting a poem in front of all the poets, eminent writers, and this is a great transition for me. And what transition to me is, I think, transition literally is a very vast meaning, but what I feel about when I heard the name transition of poetry, I think poetry itself has many transition periods. In one poem, we can see many phases. Transition literally means a phase that connects one phase to another. So when a writer writes, poet writes, sometimes poet itself, in the poetry itself, writers shift his thought process or writing pattern. And we can see in one poem many transition phase in some poetry, not at all, but in some poetry. And for me, as a woman, I think, I'm not here talking about gender bias, but I think women face this transition in their life more than men. Because for every woman, we have to leave the home where we were born and brought up. And that time when we get married and we become the married woman, that time is the major and drastic change will happen in our life. That is the major transition period of every woman, in my view. And some of the poem I write about that feeling either happiness or sadness, because we cannot expect everything positive in life. Because sometimes after being a married woman, we are being judged and we were criticized, and that brings negative feeling to us. And some of my poetries are based on that. And that after coming to Noida, after marriage I come to Noida, and that was my first time in NCR. And then what happened, I was born and brought up in a joint family with lots of relatives here. I came with my husband and I felt very lonely here because all my relatives are here in my birthplace. And that happened after that I used to write poetry in my childhood, but I left writing meanwhile because of my study, and I started science, so I left writing poetry. But after that time, coming to NCR, I started again writing poetry, and that was also one of my transition period. And I wrote this my first book, A Little Piece of Melancholic Sky. And in that poetry, in that poetry itself, I found me transit my thought from a melancholic thought to a very beautiful thought. Like I found my flame and fire in that night. I saw night as a mother, and sometimes as a sister and as a friend. And in the middle of night at 2 a.m. I was writing that poem, I still remember. And I saw night as my mother. And I found that in my melancholic sky, I found a place to dance and sing with the flame and fire added by the queen of the night. That poem ended like that. And thank you very much.
Thank you. We must thank Sahitya Akademi, Malasriji, Jyotiji for organizing this. Because normally when we talk about poetry of transitions, we are speaking a lot. It's not easy at all. Therefore now what will we do? We have such eminent poets, we'll go for their readings, maybe 10 minutes or 7 minutes. Okay, that means each of you will have 7 minutes, 2 poems each. Thank you. And in fact, if we have time, we'll invite somebody who was poetry. Thank you. Go ahead, Amlanchi, start. No, please.
I'm trying to pick 3 poems inside.
You do that, please.
Thank you.
Transition has no regulation.
As I said, we are inside time and we are outside. This one is called Turning Points. As the background, I think what I said in the last 10 minutes was basically what this poem is trying to convey, both in terms of this time and history point, as well as language, as well as this kind of, there's a bit of, there's some parts about performance too. Turning points. I like the kind of history that clutches banana flowers at the doorstep and brings them to the kitchen for a good meal. The kind of history where father says, this has not been done before. Where women sing together in empty lots, a clapping club, but there are voices and they are happy. History that passes mouth to mouth like a long curved curved line zigzagging across the years, a river that grows with every mile. Spare me the battles, the encampments, the throne. Who ruled when and how? They all turn into grass. In my world, there are 3 ways to make it count. First, if the way you came back is different from the way you left. Second, if no one remembers you anymore, even those you once knew. Third, during oral renderings of life stories, popularly called mythologies, if you moved someone from stone. This one is a small poem, transition. This is about my daughter when she was 2 months old. So becoming a father is a very significant transition. And my daughter is there right now. She's turning 9 in 3 days. So she's Tara in school and we call her Zenzi at home. Like, you know, as in Bengali we have Datnam and official name. So yeah, so this one is called Sunlight. This was when I would watch my baby daughter of 2 months looking at the blinds of the window, and this poem is about that. I'm very fond of this poem, as you can see, as I'm fond of my daughter. Sunlight. Sunlight talks to Zenzi these days. She mumbles, yes, and sunlight listens and falls in love slanted. All quiet, they talk a silent language. Her eyes follow light's trail. Hopscotch plays, dappled here, now there. She's surprised and shows it. How light moves, so swift, a comet's tail. Her eyes turn, Earth and Venus, waiting for light's next move, cat and mouse. And the third one is a poem from Guwahati. If we have time later, we can figure out other poems. But third one is, it's called Bus Routes of Childhood. It's from my book, Vital Signs. Here it goes. Maskwa, fish eater. Digholi Pukuri, long pond, not hill pukuri, stone pond. Or Jur Pukuri, twin ponds. Nakkata Pukuri, chalk nose pond. Ambari, mango garden. Borolo Mukh, mouth of river. Sharab Bhatti, booze joint. Adabari, ginger garden. Near Jalukbari, pepper garden. Jorabad, stitching ways to the hills where the air turns cold. Tiniali, Trialis, Sariali, Foralis. Bijoynagar, Victory City swamped by the flood. Baroari, where 12 come together for a cause. Panbazar, Betel Leaf Bazaar, books housed in childhood. Antgaon, 8 villages, can't find any. Purunigudam, Old Bodam, near Ma's place. Olakpari, garden of Olak flowers, dad's place. Khotiamari, where the deer was killed. Hantipur, place of peace near a hospital, a football field. Nagaon, 9 villages where Ma comes from. Bus routes of childhood, no place to sit, standing room only. On the ledge, breeze on hair, travelling tomorrow with yesterday's eyes. Crossing fairy tales along the way, but never knowing, not paying a penny. The bus stops at odd, dusty places, looking for memories. No passenger in sight. Come one, come all, the conductor screams. There are no mango gardens, victory cities or villages left. They were gone when I came. Ways no longer knit on their own. The old ponds remain. Feelings dip. Mirrors face the past, carrying sirens at midnight. Once upon a time, there was no city. There were only dreams, gardens, a flower market. And you still ask me, why do I like it so much?
Thank you.
This poem I just the poem I wrote just 2 days ago when I talked after my student about writing poem on transition, and title of the poem is "Evolution is a Painful Process." Behind the window of simple smile and the curtain of perfect happiness, sorrow sits comfortably, not on expensive Turkish carpet or on floral Kurdish rug, neither wearing a garment made from soft Chinese satin, nor wrapped in a delicate Banarasi sari, but on the savvy linen of life, woven by the threads of perfect agony, wearing the garment of unrequited happiness sometimes. On the other side of the border, behind the mask of enemy, it is the human who cries, bleeds, and dies. It is the human child who smiles on some silly jokes and cries over the melting of an ice cream, simply like those children who were on this side of the line. But like that uprooted tree who no longer remembers the smell of the earth, how often we forget their smiles or their sorrow behind those smiles. Perhaps life is not like seasons, for seasons keep coming one after another. And flowers don't miss to bloom when the spring comes, or trees don't miss to change the hue when the autumn arrives. Unlike the moments of life, those are gone and come sometimes only to make us laugh or cry from the land of nostalgia, often when melancholy whispers in the ear of mine. But mine often plays the trick, and illusion spread wide over the unspeakable truths of life. In order to survive, we do whatever it takes. Indeed, evolution is a painful process. People change, relationships change without prior announcement or warning. They say, embrace the change, for it's natural. Then I must say, nature is not natural. For nature only maintains balance. Sooner or later, no doubt, the balance will be set, and we may pay the price. But I wonder, will there be an imbalance between the perfect agony and imperfect happiness? And my second poem is my horizon. Words do not cry or smile, but we do. And we seek refuge behind the shadow of perfect words or invincible silence, either to express happiness or to console heart's ache. When life witnessed the perfect storm and nowhere is the safe place, I stretch my arms and sigh. When I try to touch the horizon of my limit, my whispers become hue before my very eyes to paint the sky of my part. But I confess, I was not given the chance to choose the sense. What if I deny to accept what was served on my plate? Will I stay starved for the rest of my life for my choice? Or will I die with my limit after accepting whatever is offered to me, either as rightful heritage or as gift and charity? My horizon gradually starts fading before my eyes, and I'm watching like a mountain who has witnessed so many rivers meeting the ocean. But does the memory of water still carry their song when rivers become ocean? The third poem is, this is the first book I published by this name, and this is the title poem, A Little Piece of Melancholic Sky. A little piece of melancholic sky. This is all I have in this evening of life. The darling sun is resting in the arms of scarlet sky of the west, leaving me alone in the east with the longing of a dawn that I am not certain of. The majesty of the night with her cloak full of stars, wearing the veil of mystery, is approaching her arms. But I see a mother, a sister, and a friend from a time immemorial. She asks me nothing, but her eyes, as bright as the full moon, are looking into my soul. I do not know what she finds, but I am certain of her love and glory that makes a nightingale sing such melodious song and a poet write his euphonious ode. And I, in the middle of my melancholic sky, find my moon and my stars, and a place to dream and dance with the fire and the flame that the Queen of Night has added more. Thank you.
Mandira, please.
Thank you so very much. As I said, the transition has occurred in my poetry. From a happy-go-lucky teenager, I have become a disillusioned person because of war and pandemic. So I will read two poems, one on war and another on pandemic. First one is the enemies of war. This is more of journalistic writing than poetry. Who wins in any war? From the time immemorial kings have fought. No dynasty is left to see their proof. Generals from the southwest halt. Russian army halt. Spread music over Kyiv, not missiles halt. Killing innocents in Crimea. Now Kyiv falls. Chernihiv is bombarded. Colossal attack, huge attack on children and women. Mariupol falls. Refugees now flee to Berlin, Poland, where fresh life may begin. Forces from all sides as anything troops advance. Annexed Crimea earlier, now Odessa. Can the destiny be approached through the Black Sea? Now fortunately Red Cross arrives in buses to the cities who will combat weapons with music and songs. Nightmares will pass, the sun will shine. Nightmares will pass, the sun must shine. And last one is on pandemic. Kafka's world. Smell of death fills this air. Smell of dead bodies, dead bones. Bodies fainted in ventilators, OTs, like fainted frogs in wax board in biology classes ready for dissection. Morbid evenings condemn the virus. Men wait in the crematoriums, can't even touch his son's body. Cremation is possible unattended. Funerals are without any relative. All well without touching others. Is this untouchability? It is Kafka's world. Kamukrai is powerless, facing distress and destiny in a morbid, distraught world. Then from the cities, survivors move to nowhere, entire livings on their cycles. Wife delivers the baby on the street. Whom to blame, only God can answer. He can only send remedies. But, O Krishna, we all know that the soul is immortal. But can you tell us, where are they going? Towards which destinations? Unknown destinations. Migration to their own homes. Migrants marching, indeed marching before the next battle will begin.
poets love to hear about their poetry and comments. I'll read 2 small poems, but please feel free to speak about their poetry or poetry on transition. That's lovely. Everybody loves that because poetry is suffering a lot post-pandemic. Few read, few write. The expression and exchange is very nice. My poem is one, Transition. Always the flapping sound will reach the broken branches. A bird will fly out with a screech towards open sky, and uncertainty will light that scene, will not mean a thing. Each war inside the heart brocades the path with littered bodies and pyres of rejection, designated with dancing fire. We all must provide solace to the cold earth. Next season, hopefully, a crop will sing in golden delight with pulsating wind. All the trees will bend down with farms and fruits and promises to be broken whenever we find life, and life cannot become. Transition to small one. Be very careful. The lingering shadow is death, tiptoeing to kiss. Life is yet to unfold. Often it is cataract inside the soul that does not let peeking outside and see for ourselves how a small patch of love and waiting embraces dissolution in neglect. Not that love is not chuckling inside raindrops, tickling the wet twigs and whispering leaves. Be very careful. The enduring silence is faithlessness waiting to hurt you. Life has so much to celebrate. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, sir. I take this opportunity by inviting Professor Mala Srilalana, convener, English Organizing of Sahitya, to share her thoughts on this beautiful evening.
Thank you very much. It's indeed been an absolute treat to listen to all the four speakers today. And one of the tasks of the convener is to think up titles and program frameworks on behalf of the language that I am working for, which is English. And when it came to a program for January, I thought poetry of transition would be a good subject. And I'm just so delighted to see the variety in which each one of you has taken this subject forward. It was also my observation that most of us in Delhi are people in transition anyway. And even as I heard each of you speak, Amlan was talking about bus routes. There's Misna talking about moving from one part of the country to another through marriage. There was Amarendra talking about the variety of situations that time and authors, he quoted several authors, take us through. So it's a transition through even one literary journey. And then we have Bondira bringing Kafka to us when she looks at the world around in the pandemic. So in our personal lives, many of us in Delhi are migrants. And that thought came to me very strongly when the pandemic threw up this whole debate and discussion on migrant workers. And I said, but aren't we all migrant workers? What brought us to this city? And what is our relation to this city? But that's the broader canvas, or perhaps not exactly the canvas only of poetry, but the canvas of a much larger discussion. But when it comes to transitions, I think this broad idea of what is a migrant, who is a migrant, what is home, is there a home, what are the cultural transitions, rather known by interest in cultural transitions, rather herself is a translator, so that's another kind of a transition. So, I mean, I know so many of you in the room and I know some of you are writing. It's a subject with infinite richness and potential. And at this moment, I don't want to say anything more, but to acknowledge the diversity with which all four of you have brought the subject to the audience today at the Sahitya Academy. So, of course, back to the chair to take this forward for the next several minutes.
Yes. Somebody else. See, I think. Please,
This question is from
please introduce yourself. We'd love to know. Poets love to know the names.
I am Smita Sehgal. My question is to Amlan. Amlan, we see in your poems a lot of beautiful imageries from Assam. So how has it influenced your poetry to sustain this transition?
A part of me is still in Assam. I play with this idea of multiple selves. I feel very seriously about it. So, this question of a very, this identity question that one has to be kind of a coherent identity, one person, all kind of a jigsaw fitting. I think none of us are like that. So, I think the idea of celebrating pluralities, both culturally as well as in our own kind of selves, sometimes leads to dissonance, all right, but that dissonance is healthy. All dissonance is healthy for art. If there was no dissonance, there would be no art. It comes from a sense of disquiet. But back to Assam, part of me is still there. A part of me, say one foot is here. Tara, for example, is born in Delhi. My constant thing is, and I'm Aparna is Pravashi Kahani from the heartland. So she's traveled everywhere and so on. Who speaks much better Hindi than I can ever dream. So in other words, in our house also we have a very polyglot kind of existence. However, having said that, I do sense a sense of transition on me. From my first book, which was River Valley, very deeply embedded in place to vital signs written during the pandemic, where a sense of place is there naturally, but there is also a sense of a slightly more, here we are all in our kind of common predicament, besieged, so to speak. So the sense of place is somewhat subdued. But I want my poetry to feel. There has to be feel in poetry. There has to be affect. People must feel. It cannot be entirely intellectual in nature. And therefore, I feel that to have feel, there must be place in your poetry. There must be elements which are very concrete in terms of how one relates to things. Just as ephemera is what you deal with. I don't know whether that answers your question, but I'll stop.
Yes.
I'll add something. There is a young poet, Akhil Katyar, who writes lots about poetry of transitions. 2 lines, he says, my addresses were closed. My poetry does not.
Beautiful. I think what Kamlan said, that a part of me is still there. That answers the entire thing. Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Amlan.
Sir? As everyone is talking about the pandemic, so I thought to bring this subject. During the period of pandemic, I saw most of the poets and editors, they are publishing books and anthologies on this pandemic as a theme. At that time, something came to my mind, and I thought, why not I publish a book for the COVID, not on the theme of COVID. And that time I started a project called May Love Heal the World. And that project is, I publish book and I donate my entire royalty from the book to COVID fund. And first volume I published successfully, and all the poets and many supporters, they go buy the book, and I could donate rupees 26,000 to World Health Organization COVID fund and 10,000 to PM fund. And after that, I still continuing that project. I published 2 books. From the second volume, I did for the children's, that's the children's anthology. So from the second volume, I could donate 12,000 to UNICEF. And I am still continuing that project. Now I am working on the 3rd volume. Thank you.
Thank you for the information. Please, any other comments, questions? Yes, please.
I'm Sharad. I would like to have Amlan's view on one of the things which I really feel about. It's related to transition only. So transition, we have a different perspective towards transition during different phases of our life. So while we are going, we really love transition. While in middle ages, we go back and forth. We love transition, we do not love transition. And when we are out of certain phase of our life, then we would like to go back to the olden days. So what are your views about transition given this perspective?
Poetry.
You know, Henry Cartier-Bresson, the photographer, he has this concept called, he calls it Kairos, K-A-I-R-O-S, which is the moment. I think there's a very celebrated photograph of him on the beach during the Cape. A lot of this holding on to the moment is something that is very dear to me. This is a moment. And I try through my writing this does not happen consciously. I don't know what of this moment will come back to me someday. It might be a sneeze. And so that is one part. As far as life is concerned, how we grow and lose hair and all of that, the inevitabilities of life, I think I'll again go back to what Sir said, which is that there's so much also to celebrate that it is nice to wallow in nostalgia, but I have always looked forward to transition, so to speak. It keeps us growing, it keeps us organic, it keeps our work also alive, and so we should celebrate it. It has its pains, all change has pain, but the pain is part of it. So I would say it is a good thing. It keeps us going.
Thank you.
I want to ask Mondira about this transition from science to writing poetry. Because that's interestingly, I've heard that from many poets. Well, this I do too. And there are several poets in India and also abroad whose background is in science. And some of them have said actually studying science makes you more aware of the abstractions and the beauty of poetry. Is that true?
Shall I say something? Whatever you said, Mahasi, I fully agree with you. Because in my case, the knowledge that I gathered through my science teacher and others, mathematics professor in the college, they have been very useful, like the absolute word in math, the infinite word in math, that we had analysis I used to read. So I have not done well in maths, but that words I use so much in my poetry, absolute and infinite and eternal words exist. I exist, you exist. That word is very much used. Then limit can't cross time. There is a poem. Limit can't cross time. Time can't cross the limit. Series of waves rising and falling, there goes the eternal process. So I must say, whatever you have heard from your friends abroad and India, science helps in, absolutely, it's not that science is a better subject than humanities, because poetry is imagination, science needs evidence. You have to prove what you are saying, but imagination is more powerful than the giving only the proof or the evidence. So that way literature has its way ahead.
From world it goes intergalactic.
Yes, from the world it goes intergalactic. That was.
And who better than Jayanta Mahapatra? Who was a
Yes,
physics
absolutely.
professor.
He was a
He
physicist.
started as a poet of transition.
Yes.
A science professor, he started that way. True.
Very true.
In fact, we had a session here.
Yes.
एक छोटी सी
Yeah, please.
मंदिरा जी ने अभी जो बात करी वो काफ़ी एक पॉपुलर चीज़ भी है कि इमेजिनेशन जो है वो साइंस पे भारी पड़ती है या पढ़नी चाहिए या
Yes,
पढ़ी
yes,
है
yes.
कुछ ऐसे अगर अपन उदाहरण भी अगर आपसे या किसी कोई भी उसको दे तो ये बात ज़्यादा अच्छी तरह प्रूव होगी तो वो अच्छी लगेगी क्योंकि आजकल लोग सिर्फ साइंस ही करते हैं दो दूनी चार। हालांकि मैं ऐसी बहुत सी इमेजिनेशंस भी बता सकती हूँ जो साइंस पे भारी पड़ी है या साइंस को भी उसने कल्टीवेट किया है।
नहीं, ब्यूटी ऑफ द नेचर, उसको फिजिकल फॉर्म में भी आप देखो, फिजिकल फॉर्म में देखो तो ब्यूटी ऑफ द नेचर, उसमें तो तुम्हें ये आएगा कि ऑक्सीजन है, हाइड्रोजन है, नाइट्रोजन है, ऑल। और ये जो तुम ब्यूटी ऑफ नेचर को एक पोएट्स एंगल को देखो तो इट इज द ब्यूटी ऑफ द स्काई, उसमें नाइट्रोजन वगैरह बोलने की जरूरत नहीं है।
Relativity of expression.
Relativity of expression, he is right. That is the
And
most.
when it reaches you, it rebounds with meaning. That's transition.
That is.
Otherwise, I will write like Shakespeare. That's meaning के साथ. You are right.
पोइट्री को वो उन्हें लगता है
मैं यही बोल रही
कि जो
हूँ,
प्रूवन फैक्ट है दैट इज ओनली
poetry is total imagination. You can go inside the sea and go down to the interior of the sea and see so many things. And as a scientist, you have to see and give the evidence on so many fish is there. You have to give the evidence of, but the beauty you cannot see. Scientists can't see the beauty. But
The point you made,
poet-
meaningful poetry also can relate to transition.
Yes.
As science gives you so many references, cosmic, galactic and all that. When you bring that, it just, as a poet, it sprouts meaning.
मेरे भी कहने का मतलब ये था कि बहुत सी इमेजिनेशन से भी साइंस जो है वो पुख्ता है।
देखा जी
I was never good in maths, so I'm the last person to talk about it. But I have been watching YouTube videos of Professor Manjul Bhargava, the eminent mathematician, genius. Manjul Bhargava talks very lucidly about how rag theory and how he's a tabla player and he's a very trained tabla player. He's very well trained in rag, and he actually talks about how the other side,
Yes.
which is how his knowledge of Indian classical music, especially his tabla, has helped him frame his mathematical thinking.
Yes.
And I think that is I found it a very revealing insight. But of course, I don't know the details of it because I've never been good in maths. But I found it very nice to know that it can also be the other way around.
It's synthesis of acquired art and imagination.
And I think science जो है हमें और spirituality में भी ला सकते हैं. Because when I studied science, I came to know that there's nothing different in the level of DNA between me and the virus or even a single
But as
cell.
scientists, you have to prove it. How it is different, how it is
But
similar.
we are all made of DNA. So I think that people also maybe it's a DNA because we all have DNA.
Let's have your little finger.
Yes, we are looking forward to it.
The chairs are doing it all.
Yeah, absolutely. See, after 2022, cutting across, like say in Nigeria, I gave the name Okereke, Ghana, Dimbo, Akhil, Katya, regional poetry. So for example, in Karnataka, there is a original haiku movement now of transitional poetry. Why transitional poetry is coming? Because post-COVID psychology is weak. Anything is affecting you. Say, you are not thinking about how the war will end. The war is taking place, that is affecting you. He moves his place from XYZ place to Noida. That brings transition inside the poetic ability, reflection and all. Whether it is love, whether it is friendship, whatever you talk about, poet can write about anything. But when we are talking about poetry of transition, it is just not text or context. It is also your ability to express, to reach out. That reaching out, if it jails, that transitional feeling inside you, inside the reader, that is the success of the poets. And all of them read such good poetry. And basically we are waiting more reactions, because poets nowadays cry for comments, opinions, exchanges, especially after 22. You know that, right? It's the statistics. Poetry book publication has gone down by 43% in India. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just in a concluding remarks, as ma'am said, see, we all, as human beings, we all start our life in young as a Marxwadi. We all follow only Marxism. But as and when the age grows, as and when we become elder, I don't know where this Marxism goes off. And we become much more in a different stream. And we take a different stream. So, if you talk about, I think ma'am is asking Amla and Jyoti ji that why there are so many symbols that have been used. There is a statement in Sanskrit that Swabhavo nopasekyate kartumanyatha. You can't change the nature by means of advices. Because my accent cannot be changed because I have my own mother tongue. And the influence of mother tongue will be there everywhere. So that's why whether the translation is there in form of usage of vocabulary, similes, metaphors, or content, or what not. So with these few words, once again I thank sincerely the chair of today's literary forum, Sri Amarendra Katwaji, for chairing this session and giving a beautiful points about the topic of today, that is poetry of transition. I sincerely thank all the three participants, Sri Amla and Jyoti Goswamiji, Ms. Mandira Kochi, and Ms. Mishna Chanuji for participating and enlightening the entire audience with your views. And I sincerely thank Professor Malasnila ma'am for gracing the occasion and acknowledge the presence of Sri Mohan Himtani ji, convener, Sindhi Advisory Board of Sahitya Akademi, and all the audience of today's function. And I sincerely thank our Secretary Sir, Dr. K. Srinivasa ji, for giving us opportunity to have another program of a unique kind. And sincerely thanks Sri Krishna Rabindra Kimbohane and as well as Jyoti Krishna ji for taking their pain to organize our function and the program. And I sincerely thank all of you. Hope you try to extend your support and encourage us to do many of this kind. So all of you are invited for thank you. Why not? Definitely.